Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really huge topic, something fundamental to economic life. Inequality, poverty, and what governments actually do about it through redistribution.
Exactly. And our goal here is pretty clear, though the subject itself is complex. We want to give you the tools, the language economists use, how we measure these things, how we think about poverty beyond just a number, and importantly, the economic logic behind government intervention, but also the trade-offs. Always trade-offs.
Okay, so we'll be digging into concepts like utility, diminishing marginal utility, absolute versus relative poverty. But maybe first things first, before we get to the solutions, we need to understand the scale, right? How unequal is the economic pie? What are we even measuring?
Right. We absolutely have to start by drawing a clear line between two key ideas: income and wealth. Income, think of it as a flow. It's money coming in over time, your paycheck, wages, that sort of thing.
Okay, flow, like a river of money.
Exactly. And wealth, that's a stock. It's everything you own at one specific point in time. Your savings, your house, car, investments, all of it added up. A snapshot.
Got it. So looking at the flow first income, the numbers are pretty stark, aren't they? I saw that the bottom fifth, the lowest 20% of earners in the U.S., they only get about, 3.8% of all the income?
That's right, just 3.8%. It's a tiny sliver. And contrast that with the top fifth, the richest 20%.
Yeah.
They're pulling in almost half of the total national income, around 48.8%.
No. Nearly half for the top fifth, less than 4% for the bottom fifth. That gap feels enormous.
It is, and it's widened quite a bit over the past few decades. A lot of that gain has gone right to the very, very top earners.
Okay, so that's income. But you said wealth is different. If the income picture is stark, what does the wealth picture look like?
Is it worse? Oh, much worse. It's far, far more unequal. Get this. If you take the bottom three income quintiles, that's 60% of the population, and add up all their wealth.
60%, okay.
They hold just 1.8% of the total national wealth.
Wait, 1.8% for more than half the people.
Yes. It's incredibly low. Now compare that to the wealthiest quintile, the top 20%. They hold 89% of all the wealth.
89%. So 20% of the people own almost 9/10 of everything.
That's the picture. It's an extremely concentrated distribution.
That is staggering. But let me push back a little here. If we only look at 1 year's income or wealth right now, doesn't that miss something? Like, what if I'm a student this year, my income is tiny, but I expect to earn more later? Or someone loses their job temporarily? Does that make them look poorer than they sort of really are over the long run?
That's a really important point. And yes, economists worry about that too. Snapshot data can be misleading. That's why we also look at things like permanent income.
Permanent income?
Yeah, it's an estimate of your average income over your whole lifetime. It tries to smooth out those temporary blips like being a student or having a bad year. And when you look at permanent income, the inequality picture is still there, definitely, but it's usually a bit less severe than just looking at a single year's income.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just a longer view. What about how people actually live day to day? Does spending tell a different story?
That's the other measure, spending inequality. And here, the gap narrows again. Remember, the richest fifth earns about 13 times what the poorest fifth earns.
Yeah.
But they only spend about 4 times as much. So the difference in actual consumption, the stuff people buy and use, is much less dramatic than the income difference suggests. It gives us maybe a slightly less alarming view of living standard differences.
Interesting. So income inequality is huge, wealth inequality is astronomical, but spending inequality is less so.
Yeah.
That nuance is important. Now, even with these gaps, there's this powerful idea in the U.S., right? The land of opportunity. Work hard, move up. How true is that, really?
That brings us to intergenerational mobility. Basically, how much does your parents' economic status determine your own? Can you easily climb the ladder regardless of where you started?
And the reality is?
Well, despite the strong belief in it, the data suggests the U.S. actually has less intergenerational mobility than many other comparable wealthy nations. Places like Canada, Australia, Germany, the Nordic countries, they often show more movement between income levels across generations. So where you're born economically matters quite a bit here, perhaps more than we like to think.
So the playing field isn't quite as level as the narrative suggests. And if wealth is so stuck at the bottom and mobility is limited, that leads us straight to poverty, doesn't it? How does the government even define who is poor? What's the official line?
We use the poverty line. It's an official income threshold set by the government, and it changes based on family size. For instance, back in 2018, for a family of 4, it was $25,100 a year.
Okay, $25,100 for 4 people. If your income is below that, you're officially counted as poor.
Yeah.
And the overall poverty rate.
In recent years, it's been hovering around, say, 12% or so. But here's the really curious thing. That official rate hasn't changed much in decades. Decades, even though average incomes in the country have gone up quite a bit.
How does that work? If people are generally earning more, why isn't the poverty rate falling?
Well, this points to a big measurement issue. The official poverty measure mostly looks at cash income before taxes and, crucially, before many government benefits kick in.
Ah, so it doesn't count things like food stamps or housing assistance or tax credits for low-income families.
Exactly. It largely ignores the very programs designed to reduce poverty. So many economists argue the official rate kind of overstates the level of hardship after all government help is factored in. It's not capturing the full picture.
I see. That's critical context.
Yeah.
This seems related to another distinction you mentioned, absolute versus relative poverty. Can you break that down?
Sure. Absolute poverty is about lacking the basic resources needed for survival. Think food, clean water, basic shelter. There's often a fixed universal standard. The World Bank, for example, uses a line of living on less than $1.90 a day for extreme global poverty. Hundreds of millions live below that line worldwide.
And people in the U.S., even those officially poor, are generally well above that $1.90-day level, right?
Generally, yes. Their struggles are immense, but it's a different scale than extreme global poverty. That's where relative poverty comes in. It's about being poor compared to others in your own society. Are you falling significantly behind the typical standard of living where you live? It's often defined as having income below, say, half the median income in your country.
So it's about your position within your society, not against a fixed survival baseline. And the U.S. poverty line, you said it's sort of a weird mix.
It is a bit strange, historically speaking.
All right.
When it was created back in the early 1960s, it was somewhat relative based on food costs and typical incomes then. But since then, it's basically just been adjusted for inflation.
So it's frozen in time, relatively speaking.
Pretty much. It's become an absolute dollar amount tied to 1960 standards, just updated for price changes. As the country's gotten much richer overall, that fixed line represents a smaller and smaller fraction of the typical income, making it arguably less relevant for judging who's truly struggling to participate in modern American life.
Okay, that historical context helps understand why the official rate is so sticky. Who tends to experience poverty most often?
Well, poverty affects all groups, but the risk isn't shared equally. For example, it's significantly more common among Black and Hispanic communities compared to white or Asian populations. Child poverty rates also remain worryingly high. But maybe the single biggest factor linked to poverty is employment status.
Oh, so.
If you look at adults who work full-time all year round, only about 3% of them fall below the official poverty line. Consistent full-time work is a very strong buffer against poverty. The lack of it is a major driver.
So steady work is key. You also mentioned something interesting about the duration of poverty, spells versus people.
Yes, this is a subtle but important point. If you look at individual episodes or spells of poverty, most of them are actually quite short, about less than a year. People fall into poverty, maybe due to job loss, but climb back out relatively quickly.
Okay, so lots of short spells.
But if you look at the population of people who are poor at any one specific time, the picture flips. The majority of those people are actually in the middle of a long-term spell of poverty, one that's likely to last 8 years or even more.
Wow. So while many people cycle in and out quickly, the bulk of the poverty we see at any moment is chronic long-term poverty.
Exactly. It's a dynamic situation, but those long-term cases make up most of the persistent problem we measure.
That distinction is really helpful. Okay, so we understand the scale, the definitions. Now, what does the government actually do? What are the main tools for redistribution?
Broadly speaking, governments use 3 main approaches. First, there's the social safety net.
The safety net, okay.
These are programs providing direct help cash or often goods and services to people with low incomes. Think food assistance like SNAP, housing vouchers, Medicaid. The crucial feature here is that they are means-tested.
Means-tested, meaning you have to prove your income is low enough to qualify.
Precisely. Your eligibility depends directly on your financial situation.
Okay. Now, I notice you mentioned goods and services. Why give people, say, food vouchers or help with childcare instead of just giving them cash? Isn't cash more flexible? Some people might see it as, I don't know, paternalistic.
That's a very common and fair question. There are a few economic arguments, though, for providing in-kind transfers the goods and services instead of just cash. One argument is about taxpayer preferences. Taxpayers might feel better ensuring money goes towards specific needs like food or housing, rather than worrying it might be spent on something they disapprove of.
Okay, aligning with what the public wants to support.
Right. Second, it can target specific problems more directly, like reducing hunger or improving child health. Third, sometimes giving a benefit that only someone truly needy would value, like basic food items, can help reduce fraud. And fourth, some in-kind benefits, like childcare or job training, are seen as complementing work helping people get or keep jobs, which addresses that core poverty issue we talked about.
Okay. So there are rationales beyond just telling people how to spend money.
Yeah.
What's the second big tool then?
The second bucket is social insurance. This is different from the safety net. Think of programs like Social Security for retirement and disability, or unemployment insurance.
How are they different? Don't they also help people financially?
They do, but the key difference is they are not means tested. Your eligibility and the amount you receive aren't based on being poor now. They're based on your past contributions you and your employer paid into the system while you were working. It's like insurance against predictable life events, old age, job loss, disability.
So it's based on past work and contributions, not current need.
Got it.
And the third tool?
The third one is maybe the most obvious, the tax system itself, specifically using a progressive tax structure.
Progressive, meaning higher earners pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes.
Exactly. Our federal income tax system is designed to be progressive. As your income goes up, the tax rate you pay on each additional dollar earned also goes up through different brackets.
But we sometimes hear stories about billionaires paying a lower effective tax rate than their secretaries. If the income tax is progressive, how does that happen?
Yeah, that's where it gets complicated. While the income tax rates are progressive, a few things can reduce the overall tax burden for the very wealthy. A big one is how investment income is treated.
Capital gains.
Right. Income from selling assets like stocks, called capital gains, is often taxed at lower rates than regular wage income. Since the wealthiest get a large portion of their income from investments, this lower rate significantly affects their overall tax percentage.
Okay, lower rates on investment income. What else?
Also, there are various deductions, exemptions, and exclusions in the tax code that tend to benefit higher earners more, reducing the amount of their income that's actually subject to tax in the first place. So the headline rates are progressive, but the effective rate someone actually pays can be a different story due to these factors.
That makes sense. And the opposite of progressive is?
Regressive tax. That's where lower income people end up paying a larger percentage of their income in taxes compared to higher income people.
How does that happen?
Sales taxes are a common example. Everyone pays the same rate, say 7%, on things they buy. But for a low-income person, spending on basic goods takes up a much bigger chunk of their total income than for a wealthy person. So that 7% represents a higher share of the poor person's earnings.
Okay, safety net, social insurance, progressive taxes. Yeah. Those are the tools. Now, the big debate, should we redistribute? What's the economic case for it, and what are the costs?
The classic economic justification comes from utilitarianism. It starts with the idea of utility, basically, a measure of a person's well-being or happiness.
Utility, happiness.
Okay. Then comes the concept of diminishing marginal utility.
Right, you mentioned this earlier. The idea that each extra dollar gives you less happiness than the one before it. Like the 10th slice of pizza isn't as good as the first.
Exactly. An extra $100 means a lot more to someone struggling to pay rent than it does to a millionaire. The millionaire's marginal utility from that extra $100 is very low. The poor person's is very high.
So the utilitarian logic is?
If you take $100 from the rich person, reducing their utility only slightly, and give it to the poor person, increasing their utility significantly, the total happiness or utility in society goes up. Utilitarianism argues we should aim to maximize that total societal utility.
That sounds pretty logical on paper. Maximize happiness by shifting resources to where they matter more. But then comes the catch, right? The leaky bucket.
Ah, yes, Arthur Oaken's famous analogy. The idea is when you try to carry money from the rich to the poor in this bucket, some of it leaks out along the way. The transfer isn't perfectly efficient.
Why does it leak? What causes the loss?
There are two main leaks. The first one is pretty straightforward. Administrative costs. It takes people, offices, computers, resources to run these government transfer programs. That's a small leak, usually.
Okay, bureaucracy costs money. What's the bigger leak?
The bigger, more debated leak is the impact on work incentives. Redistribution can potentially dull the incentive to work hard, both for those paying the taxes and those receiving the benefits.
How so? On both ends.
Well, for high earners, if tax rates get very high to fund redistribution, the reward for working that extra hour or starting that risky business gets smaller. They might decide to work less or invest less, which shrinks the overall economic pie.
Okay. High taxes reduce incentive at the top. What about at the bottom?
For low-income individuals receiving means-tested benefits, there's a disincentive too. If they start earning more money, their benefits often get reduced or phased out. So for every extra dollar they earn, they might lose, say, 50 cents in benefits, plus they pay income tax on that dollar.
Ouch. So earning more could mean barely gaining anything or maybe even losing out in some cases.
It can, yes. That combined impact the tax paid plus the benefits lost for each extra dollar earned is called the effective marginal tax rate. And for some low-income workers, that effective rate can be surprisingly high, sometimes even higher than the rates paid by the wealthy. This can create a trap, discouraging people from seeking more work or higher wages.
So the leak is lost economic activity, lost production because incentives are weakened.
That's the core idea of the leaky bucket argument. The act of redistribution itself changes behavior in ways that can reduce the total amount of water economic output available.
Which brings us right to that fundamental tension, doesn't it? The trade-off between efficiency and equality.
Precisely. It's one of the central dilemmas in economics. If you aim for perfect equality, everyone gets the exact same slice, you might destroy the incentives to produce anything, leading to massive inefficiency. The pie becomes tiny even if it's shared equally.
And the other extreme.
Pure focus on efficiency? Maybe with no safety net or redistribution at all, you might get a very large economic pie, but with potentially horrific levels of inequality, poverty, and social unrest. Most societies try to find a balance somewhere in between.
Is it always a trade-off, though? Are there cases where making things more equal actually makes the economy more efficient, the so-called easy choices?
Yes, absolutely. That's an important point. Reducing extreme inequality can sometimes boost efficiency. For example, high inequality can lead to social friction, crime, and mistrust, which are economically costly. Investing in things like education for disadvantaged kids, which promotes equality of opportunity, can also lead to a more productive workforce down the line that's an efficiency gain. When people feel the system is basically fair, they might be more willing to support public investments that benefit everyone.
That leads nicely to the final piece, fairness. How do we even think about what's fair? Is it about everyone ending up in the same place, equality of outcomes?
One view.
Or is it about everyone starting from the same place, having the same shot, equality of opportunity?
That's the other main view. And achieving genuine equality of opportunity often requires some redistribution itself, like ensuring good schools or health care for everyone, regardless of their parents' income, to level that playing field. These are deeply philosophical questions with no easy economic answers.
And how much society supports redistribution seems linked to beliefs about why people are rich or poor, right? Luck versus effort.
It seems to be yes. The data you mentioned earlier is fascinating. In many developed countries, a majority believe luck plays a big role in success. But in the U.S., fewer than 40% tend to believe that. The emphasis is much more strongly on individual effort.
And that belief affects policy choices.
Research suggests it does. Countries where people believe luck is more important tend to have larger social safety nets and more redistributive policies. Beliefs about fairness and the causes of inequality really shape the political landscape.
Wow, okay, this has been a genuine deep dive. We've gone from measuring inequality, the huge gap between income and especially wealth, to defining poverty, both absolute and relative, and the issues with the official U.S. measure. Then we looked at the government's toolkit, the means-tested safety net versus social insurance, and the tax system, and finally wrestling with that core trade-off, the utilitarian case for redistribution versus the leaky bucket's efficiency costs.
It covers a lot of ground, and maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Economics, as we've discussed it, often focuses on individual choices and utility. But what happens when you bring in a more sociological lens? Think about power structures, class dynamics, group advantages, or disadvantages. How might considering those factors, power, class, systemic issues, change how you interpret the causes and consequences of the income inequality figures we discussed? What new questions does that raise for you?
That's a really important layer to add. Thinking about structures, not just individuals. Definitely something to reflect on. Thank you for joining us for this deep